The scent of salt and sunscreen still clung to my skin, a phantom reminder of the moment everything shifted. It had been years, decades perhaps, since a man's touch had felt intentional. Had I imagined the electricity, the way his hand lingered a beat too long? Or had Michael, my husband's closest confidant, really crossed a line that sun-drenched afternoon in Myrtle Beach? Welcome to the Heartstrings and Scars, where we unravel the untold stories of love, betrayal, and the life-changing lessons they leave behind. If this resonates, give a quick like and subscribe. There's much more to this story, and you won't want to miss a single twist. The South Carolina sun beat down, turning the sand into a shimmering expanse of white. We were at Myrtle Beach, a family tradition that had long lost its luster. My husband, Richard, was glued to his phone, perpetually closing a deal for his real estate firm, leaving me and his best friend, Michael, to an awkward dance of small talk and strained smiles. Michael had always been present, a fixture in our lives, a constant at our dinner table, a shoulder to cry on when Richard's ambition eclipsed our marriage. But today, something was different. I was applying sunscreen, struggling with the strap of my swimsuit. "Need a hand, Barbara?" Michael's voice was low, laced with a warmth I hadn't noticed before. I hesitated. Richard, oblivious, was still barking orders into his phone. "Just my back," I mumbled, turning away. His fingers were surprisingly gentle, tracing the line of my spine. A shiver ran through me, not entirely from the cool lotion. It had been so long since anyone had touched me with such care. The thought hit me harder than I cared to admit. Then his hands moved lower, slowly, deliberately down the curve of my back. My breath caught. I opened my mouth, but no words came. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "He's just being helpful. You're imagining things, Barbara." But I wasn't. His hands hovered, a tantalizing inch above the edge of my swimsuit bottom. I felt his hesitation, mirrored by my own. Instead of stopping him, I heard myself say, "It's okay, you can rub there, too." Michael didn't speak, but he didn't stop. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the crashing waves. I wanted to move, to speak, to break the spell. But I couldn't. Why? Was it the crushing loneliness of my marriage? A desperate craving to feel desired, even in this forbidden way? Or had I simply stopped caring about the consequences? Have you ever felt that invisible wall in your own relationship? That silent desperation for connection? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your stories. That day at the beach shattered something within me. The facade of normalcy I'd carefully constructed crumbled. Michael's gaze became a constant, unspoken question. Every time our eyes met, I saw a flicker of something, knowing, hungry. Back home, in our sprawling suburban house outside of Charlotte, I tried to bury the memory. I made Richard his favorite lasagna, asked about his day, which was predictably consumed by work, and folded laundry with trembling hands. The image of Michael's hands, the way he lingered, the tension that had crackled between us, replayed in my mind. I hated myself for it, and I hated him for awakening these feelings in me. Richard was his usual self, distant, preoccupied, a ghost in his own home. He kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture devoid of passion. "Long day?" I asked, hoping for a semblance of connection. He grunted, already halfway to the living room and his ever-present laptop. This was our routine. His presence felt like an afterthought, and I felt invisible. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Richard snored softly beside me. The house was quiet, but my mind was a tempest. I kept thinking of Michael, his hands, his gaze. I knew it was wrong, that I should stop it, whatever it was, before it went any further. But a darker, lonelier part of me clung to the attention, the touch, the fleeting feeling of being seen. The days that followed were a tightrope walk over a chasm of guilt and desire. Michael said nothing about the beach, but his silence spoke volumes. He didn't avoid me. Instead, he seemed to stay closer. I'd catch him watching me when I cooked, when I cleaned, when I sat alone on the couch at night, lost in thought. And I let it happen. I didn't stop him, and I didn't stop myself. This silence, this unspoken understanding, was a dangerous game. The following weekend, the heat was oppressive. Richard, predictably, was working a last-minute open house, leaving me and Michael alone. "Want to go back to the beach?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why did I do it? Was I seeking clarity? Or was I testing myself, pushing the boundaries to see how far I could fall? The drive was quiet, charged with unspoken tension. Michael wasn't plugged into his usual podcast. He just sat there, staring out the window, his knee bouncing restlessly. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but the words caught in my throat. At the beach, it was almost deserted. The water was a brilliant turquoise, the wind a welcome caress against my skin. I spread out the towels, mirroring our previous visit, but this time, I didn't ask for help with the sunscreen. I couldn't. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel his gaze, heavy and unwavering. The real breaking point came later, at the beach showers. We were rinsing off the sand, a mundane task that suddenly felt charged with danger. Michael stepped under the spray. First, the water sluicing down his back. I stood there, watching him, a strange compulsion overtaking me. Before I could think, I stripped off my cover-up and stood beside him. The cool water shocked my skin. Michael looked at me, startled. I don't know if it was surprise, confusion, or something darker in his eyes, but he didn't speak. "You should take off your shorts, too," I said, my voice trembling. "You need a good wash." Why did I say it? Was I trying to regain control? To test him? To test myself? He hesitated. Then slowly, deliberately, he did as I asked. And there we were, naked under the spray. The water washing away everything but the raw, undeniable truth of our desire. I turned my back to him. "Help me with my back," I whispered. His hands were careful, hesitant, but there was no mistaking the tension. When he touched my waist, I froze. The air thickened, the sound of the water fading into a distant roar. I could have walked away. I should have walked away. Instead, I leaned back, closer to him. I took his hands, guiding them to my chest. And he didn't pull away. What happened next? I can't fully describe it. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't slow. It was desperate, passionate, wrong in every conceivable way. But I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to stop it. And when it was over, we just stood there, the water still pouring down, washing away the evidence, but not the truth. He held me like no one had in years, and I let him. Was I a victim of circumstance, of a loveless marriage? Or was I actively complicit in my own betrayal? Where do we draw the line between loneliness and culpability? The drive home was a suffocating silence. The car felt too small, the air thick with unspoken guilt and desire. I gripped the wheel, my mind racing. I could still feel him, Michael, his hands, his body, the weight of what we'd done. He sat stiffly, staring out the window, his face flushed, his jaw tight. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. "Barbara," he said, his voice low and uncertain. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. What just happened back there? My heart skipped a beat. I considered pretending, brushing it off, changing the subject. But there was no point in pretending. Not after what we'd done. "I don't know," I whispered, the closest I could get to the truth. I didn't know what had happened or why. I just knew that everything had changed. We didn't speak again until we reached the driveway. I turned off the engine, but neither of us moved. Michael finally looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that frightened me. It wasn't confusion, guilt, or even shame. It was longing. "How long have you felt this way?" he asked. The question sent a shiver down my spine, because I'd been asking myself the same thing. "I don't know," I whispered. Maybe longer than I care to admit." We sat in the darkness, the silence stretching between us. I thought that was it, that we'd go inside, try to forget, pretend it hadn't happened. But Michael had other ideas. Before I could open the door, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft at first, hesitant, as if he was afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I let him kiss me, and I kissed him back. And then I lost control. Was it the loneliness, the years of neglect, the way Michael looked at me, like I was the only woman in the world? I don't know, but I let it happen right there in front of our house. Michael pulled me closer, his hands sliding over me as if they belonged there. I felt alive, wanted, seen for the first time in years. I didn't care about anything else. I don't remember much of the walk to the door, just the feel of his hand in mine, the silence between us humming with electricity. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. Once inside, everything escalated, as if we'd been holding back for too long, and the dam had finally burst. The next few days were a blur. Michael stayed close, always finding reasons to brush against me, to look at me when Richard wasn't watching. I told myself to stop, to pull away, to end it. But every time I looked at him, I saw the same loneliness I was feeling. It was like we were mirrors, reflecting back the same need, the same emptiness. And I couldn't say no. I didn't want to say no. At night, I'd lie in bed next to Richard, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. I'd think of Michael in the guest room, the way his hands felt, the way he made me feel alive again. And then I'd close my eyes, the guilt coiling like a snake in my chest. I knew it couldn't last. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop it. The tension between us grew stronger every day until it finally exploded. It was late one night. Richard was back at the office, working late. I was doing the dishes, trying not to think, when I felt Michael behind me. I turned around, and there he was, looking at me the same way he had on the beach. "Michael," I said quietly, a warning in my voice. But he didn't stop. He came closer, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. "Barbara," he whispered, "I can't stop thinking about you." I froze. My heart was pounding. I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to his room, to leave me alone. But I didn't. Instead, I looked up at him and said the one thing I shouldn't have. "I can't stop either." And that was it. That was the moment it all fell apart. Michael kissed me again, harder this time, desperately, and I kissed him back. I didn't care that it was wrong. I didn't care about Richard or the life we'd built together. All I cared about was him, Michael, my husband's best friend, the only person who made me feel like I mattered. Things haven't been the same since that day at the beach. Michael, and I crossed a line. What started as a moment has turned into something I can't control. The guilt is there, heavy, constant, but it won't stop me. And that's the part that scares me the most. I look at Richard every day and wonder how he doesn't see it, how he doesn't notice the cracks spreading through our lives. Maybe he's too busy, or maybe I've just gotten better at hiding it. But deep down, I know it can't last forever. Secrets have a way of coming out, and when they do, the fallout will destroy everything. I've tried to stop. I've told myself over and over that this is wrong, that Michael deserves better. that I deserve better. But every time he touches me, every time he looks at me like I'm the only person in the world, I lose myself. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years, maybe ever. And that's the truth I have to live with. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can fix it. And that's why I'm sharing my story. Maybe someone out there has an answer, something I haven't thought of. Maybe you can help me find a way out of this mess I've made before it's too late. So please, if you have any advice, if you've been in this situation or know someone who has, I want to hear from you. And if nothing else, let this be a warning. Loneliness can take you places you never thought you'd go. Don't get lost like I did. Don't let your world fall apart before you realize what's happening. Because once you cross that line, there's no going back. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more. I need to know I'm not alone. Sometimes the greatest betrayals aren't the ones we commit against others, but the ones we commit against ourselves. And I'm living with that betrayal every single day.